Hello, this is Daniel Lanois, and these are records in my life.
Ma jolie, how do you do? Mon nom est Jean-Louis Thibault. I'm a stranger in the eyes of the make so hard, work so hard down the road.
Hey,
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for coming on the airwaves to talk about my music.
Thank you so much for being on the show. How are you today, Daniel?
Everything's pretty good here in Toronto. I've had my workout, went for a walk. I'm working on my piano compositions, the usual busy bee.
So you're okay being in the winter of Toronto right now? Because you're usually a Los Angeles fellow, aren't you?
Well, I've avoided the Toronto winter for a while now, by Los Angeles or otherwise. I usually work abroad somewhere, but it's fine. You know, it's if you're familiar with upstate New York winters, then it's kind of the same here. You know, we have to build a snowman.
That's right. Have you been spending time upstate New York as like Hudson? Is that Hudson Valley area or?
Well, you know, I just reference it as a place that for anyone who hasn't been to Canada, it's a lot like upstate New York in terms of winter.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Well, thank you so much for being on Records in My Life. This show is about you and the music you've worked on. Tell us about your new record.
The new record is called Heavy Sun. I hooked up with some good mates in Los Angeles, Rocco DeLuca, good old friend Rocco, and Jim Wilson, and Johnny Shepard from Shreveport, Louisiana. And we decided to put a singing group together, write some new songs, and it has a little bit of gospel in its spine because Johnny's from the Zion Baptist Church in Shreveport, so he's our hymnologist, and so we thought we were in good company to make this record that has good harmony and nice messages, and hopefully bring a bit of joy to people's hearts.
Do you have a favorite track off the record or one that you're most proud of?
Oh, I love all my children, but you know, there's a couple of harmony numbers there that are sweet. There's one called The 1,000-Year-Old Tree of Tule. The Tree of Tule is one that I like. And Tumbling Stone. I think they kind of get the point across. In terms of harmony singing. And we use, Rocco invented a term in regards to harmony singing. We get to leave our egos hanging at the door, and we come in and we congregate and sing together. So it's nice feeling to be singing with people.
So this record sounds, your album sounds like it's trying to send a good message out there, some words of hope and to keep people put a good spirit out there. Was that one of the main motivations behind the album?
It just went that way. Johnny is also a minister, and so he said, well, as long as every song has a message, then I'm ready to sing outside of church. And so it was just something that it was a criteria that we were operating by, that we didn't want to be shadowed by any cynicism or to be taking the forefront. We didn't want the front of the picture to be wearing leather pants. We wanted to be congregation.
Fantastic. Now, I'd love to talk to you a bit about your production history as well, if you don't mind.
Oh, that's all fine. Whatever's good for the house is my latest motto. So
that's great.
It's your show, and I'm very, very happy to be invited. So I'll let you lead the way.
Thank you so much. It's an honor. I've been listening to your record since I'm I'm sure you've heard this before from people since I'm like 12 years old. I have great memories of listening to your records on, in the CD loader and in the shopping mall parking lot, and all that stuff. But I wanted to ask you, when was that moment? I mean, when an album kind of just grabbed you and, it grabbed you sonically, or you were like, how did they make that sound? And you became enthralled and decided you wanted to produce records.
Well, I loved records since I was a child, how could we not? I got excited when I first heard Wipeout by the Safaris, and when I heard Sleepwalk by Santo and Johnny, when I heard what was coming out of Detroit with Motown and all that great, really basically gospel music or gospel singers getting onto the pop charts, and how exciting that was. And then the coming of the psychedelic era, of course, as a guitar player, I loved the coming of Jimi Hendrix, and to hear Foxy Lady in school, it made me want to leave school.
That's fantastic. Were you able, out of curiosity, were you catching the stations from the States, because you grew up in Ontario, very close to, the Michigan border, New York State border? Did you hear a lot of stuff off the radio, like the AM dials, when you were a kid?
Oh, absolutely, because we're just a little bit, we're on the Canadian side from Buffalo, and then not that far away from Detroit, so we got a lot of the U.S. airwaves, and it was a very, very fertile time for radio by Buffalo and Detroit, but also in Toronto. We had some very innovative disc jockeys that they had these late night shows, and they went into, I think it might have been a little bit driven by drugs, but they were very poetic, and and so we have fond memories of quite renegade radio, and for pop radio to have been where it was at that time, it was really something special. It was an education in itself.
Is there a record that you wish you could have been a fly on the wall being recorded? Like Beatles or Hendrix or anything down?
Yeah. Well, let's swing over to the Hendrix records. In fact, I heard Purple Haze yesterday, and I thought, oh my goodness, the drumming on that. I mean, that Mitch Mitchell was just on fire, and what's curious about it to me is they are so rock and roll, those records, but he sounds like a jazz drummer. The tone of the drums was such that they weren't patted down or anything. They had all the ringing happening in them. So it's interesting to me that those would be viewed as the spine of rock and roll, but the kits were pretty much jazz type kits, and he was essentially a jazz drummer from what I can hear. And so, and then move on over to Led Zeppelin, and we talk about those being some of the great founding fathers of rock and roll. And I think it just says a lot about the people that were sitting at the kit, doesn't it?
Sure. Yeah, they all had that jazz, especially Ginger. Like Ginger Baker was what was. Have you ever seen that documentary where he has that drum off with? You ever seen that where he drums off with Gene Krupa?
I've never seen it, but I've heard about it, and I can't wait. I'm going to get to it now that you mention it.
And with your experience of working with the great Harold Budd and Brian Eno, what was your takeaway that you used on further recordings?
Well, when I worked with Eno and Harold Budd, at that time I was already involved with producing records in Canada, and I had made a lot of albums. But the coming of those fine young men, Eno and Harold Budd, it really stopped me in my tracks. It meant that we went fully into experimentation of sound for a good few years. I stopped doing everything else. I lived for that ambient music. And I was so grateful that Eno had come into my life, and experimentation just occupied all my time. So prior to that, I was busy doing a lot of different kind of records. But when I started working with Eno and Harold, I thought, I'll never look back. I will never do anything that I don't fully believe in from here on.
How did, just out of curiosity, how did you meet those fellas?
Eno heard some of my music in New York. these women from Toronto called the Time Twins, had a band called the Time Twins. They took their recordings to New York, met Eno, and he said, "Oh, these are great recordings. Where did you make these?" And my name came up, and that was it. He booked some time in my studio, came to Canada. I believe he was already coming to Toronto on some business. And so it was partly a matter of excitement from hearing the tape, but also a trip that he had already planned.
Now, I'm a big Bob Dylan fan, and forgive me for asking this. I wanted to ask you. Oh, Mercy's fantastic. I wanted to ask you what was the experience like? Was it? I mean, he's definitely an interesting fella, and but he seems like a perfectionist.
Well, next to James Brown, Bob Dylan's the hardest working man in show business. With the making of Oh Mercy, it was a very private setting. Imagine two guys, two chairs, two kitchen chairs, me and Bob, a Roland 808, which is a little beatbox, and our guitars, and off we went. The record was made in a kitchen area, and because we didn't have a large orchestra around Bob, I really got to focus on the center of that record. Center being Bob's voice and his lyrics, and the record sounds that way. It's very intimate, and you can feel like you can touch the details. And it's largely from that approach. Just really concentrating on the center. It became a very midnight record at a certain point. It's a very New Orleans sounding record, and Bob had a rule after a while. Says he says, well, let's only work at night from here on, because he found that there was something creeping in from the midnight, and so we kept that going.
Interesting. Now I know, like, your songs, the albums you produced, they're your babies as well. Do you have a record you're most proud of? In all your production work?
Well, I like something about everything I've worked on. I heard the Pearl, the Harold Budd Brian Eno record a couple of months back. A friend of mine had it in my studio when I walked in. Had it on playing in my studio, and I walked in. I said, "Oh my goodness, it sounds so far out and great!" And it immediately transported me someplace. And so, isn't that the job of records? We hope to transport listeners to a place. So certainly, the Pearl does that, and there was a surprise listen to Achtung Baby, the U2 record that I worked on with the fellas, partly done in Germany, in Berlin, and that record sounded great to me as well. So I stand by those two to name two.
Did you, and just a couple more questions, and thanks again, Daniel, for being on Records of My Life. Really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy fella.
Well, I'm never too busy for you.
That's really kind. Thank you. What did you, when you were working on Joshua Tree, did you have a feeling of, I know you worked on other U2 records, obviously you just mentioned Achtung Baby and Unforgettable Fire, but did you feel that record, because that record really, they were a big band, but that album, not only for them, but it was like it's a huge album, it's a great record. Did you know the impact it would have?
We felt something pretty early on with the making of the Joshua Tree. Having finished Unforgettable Fire, I mentioned to The Edge that I thought we had something left to say, and if he wanted to invite me back in, then I think we could really roll up the sleeves and do something special. And so we were of that mind. We really wanted to do something good together, and we tried an experiment, Eno and myself. He did a stint on his own, and then I came in and did a stint on my own, and then we got together and co-produced the rest of the record. So I think it was a nice thing to do, because we have very different approaches, and we thought it would be fun to split the responsibilities that way. But the record was done in a big old house outside of Dublin that had a fantastic band sound. The main, it was a large old farmhouse, so the main room really had rock and roll in it. A fabulous wooden floor, and as if we could do no wrong sonically in there. I mean, obviously we wait for performances and the idea is to flourish, but I think as a room, as a great sounding room, that was one of the best I've ever experienced. Plus, we were very concentrated. There were no. This is before cell phones and, as I've said before children, and so we were all in this house. You couldn't even make a phone call out of Ireland at that. You had to book a call ahead of time.
That's amazing.
Remember booking my Saturday morning phone call to my mom a week ahead of time, and had to go through an operator and all that. So we had nothing else to do. So we rolled up the sleeves and make the best work we could.
We got maybe 2 more questions for you. Thank you very much for their fun questions to close out the show. Weed, wine, or water to listen to your favorite song or your favorite album, or to write?
And weed, water, and wine? Is that what you said?
Weed, wine, or water. Which one would be your preference to listen to your favorite record? Or if you want to write, which one of those would you choose?
I hate to leave out all my children. I love them all.
Yeah,
well, I know. I guess we're allowed to say weed now because it's all legal.
Yes.
Well, you wouldn't need much more than water to be hopefully transported by some of our best work. So I'm going to stick to water. I'll stay out of trouble.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer. And what would you mentioned high school earlier. What would you consider the record of your high school years?
Well, I have to go back to Jimi Hendrix one more time. That's why I quit school when I heard Foxy Lady. And it was quite a reassurance because I already had my recording studio and I was questioning why I should be in school when I already had something happening that I loved. And so I want to thank Jimi Hendrix one more time for reminding me that rock and roll should be the guiding light.
Coffee with an artist, alive or dead?
Well, I've had coffee with Lee Scratch Perry, and I'd have a second cup with him any time down there in old Jamaica.
That's fantastic. I would love to hear that conversation.
Oh, yeah. It's true. There's a little late night bar. I have a little cottage in Jamaica, and just down the street from my place is this late night bar. And I was sitting there, and sure enough, I looked over, and there's Lee Scratch Perry, and I was a bit shy to introduce myself, but I did, and he was very sweet, and he told me all the secrets. And
the arc.
I've never looked back. He said, keep on going, kid. Keep experimenting because that's where the good stuff happens.
Terrific. I'm sure that must have been fun. I'm sure he had you in stitches because he's got a great sense of humor.
Well, there was not a lot of humor on the night. There was just a lot of depth, and maybe that was his way of laughing at the situation.
Thank you. Fantastic. Hamilton Tiger Cats. Touchdown.
Hi, Daniel. I'm Mark. I'm the camera guy on the show. I just want to say hi. I'm a huge fan. Love the records you've made. Love your own stuff. I play in a folk band called Farm Team, and we do 2 covers off your Acadie record. I just wanted to say hi.
Yeah,
Big
man.
blessing. Thank you for the music. Cheers.
I saw you lurking in the bushes. Thank you so much for saying hello.
He's a huge fan, by the way. He really, he's a producer extraordinaire, and he loves your.
Yeah.
We talk about your stuff all the time.
Well, you should have put him on then, and just get him wearing your glasses. I wouldn't have known the difference.
He's better looking than I am. Maybe a little smarter too, but we'll keep that. But thank you again, and best of luck with the new record, and it was a thrill to talk to you. Thanks again.
Okay, my brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.